Again, I said before, I find it difficult to think of it as a business, but just to slightly rephrase the question, if you ask me, why do I do this, or why do I need to, it's sort of a combination of releasing on paper things that I might not otherwise feel that comfortable releasing. And it's also some sort of ego gratifying activity. In other words, this is something that I do. Now, I could give you, but it would probably take too long, a whole list of things that I do not do, that I don't even feel qualified to do. And so I suppose that in a way, this counterbalances some of that. What don't I do? I don't drive. I once tried to learn. It didn't work out. I don't ride a bicycle. There is a computer, as you may have discovered in this room. My husband knows what to do with it. I don't. And I have a sort of mental block. I don't even want to learn. So I am not computer literate. I don't even use a cell phone. I live very comfortably without these things. I don't sing, although I admire singers. I have such a problem with this that at my own high school graduation back in the early 50s, I was forbidden by a music teacher to sing, and I did not. I don't dance, and the list could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to prolong it, so. I told you, I think about my educational background. I guess the only thing I didn't include before the 4 degrees, I went to a high school in Manhattan for which to go to it, I had to pass an entrance exam.
Can we start from the beginning? Because I was not shooting this before.
Oh, you want me to
The
start?
education, right? Like as if I never asked you this
Okay,
question.
okay. So, I went to public school and regular classes and that sort of thing till I was ready for high school. And then I took an entrance exam in English and math for Hunter College High School. And to my delight and surprise, I passed it. So that's where I went. One advantage of not particularly essay writing or scholarly writing, both of which I don't usually do, but of creative writing, is that one does not have to write in his or her own voice. And so I am free to write in, well, an even illiterate way, that if I were taking an exam to prove my literacy in English, it would probably almost automatically cause me to fail. Yes, people would say, you want to teach English and you don't even know the rules of grammar. But, by the way, on Saturdays, most Saturdays, not this week, but most Saturdays, I go to a poetry group also in another library, the King's Highway Library. One thing that gives me great delight, sick as this might sound, is to correct people's grammar. I guess some of them appreciate it and some of them get annoyed. And my poor victimized husband here knows that if we're watching television and somebody misuses either who or whom, I have a kind of field day, right? Nobody else knows about it, but yeah. When I was in elementary school, we were not taught grammar. Instead, we participated in sort of usage exercises. Who, whom, I, me, this sort of thing. And if we gave correct answers, the teacher would say, good, correct, But they never gave us reasons. So I was really curious to the point it really bothered me. And I got up one Saturday morning when my parents were still sleeping, and I went to the dictionary. And I discovered that at the back of the dictionary, there was sort of a short version of English grammar. So I taught myself all about parts of speech and all these rules that determined why, when I gave correct answers, they were correct, or if they were incorrect, why. And so that's what I did for myself. And about a week later, our regular English teacher was out sick, and we had a substitute. And she had us doing one of these usage exercises. But unlike what had happened to me in school before, she asked for reasons. Why is this correct? And I knew all the reasons, and I gave them to her. And she asked everybody else, how come you don't know? And they said, we were never taught. Well, then why does she know? And I was not about to tell them that I had taught myself. I figured that would really make you sound like a nerd. So it was my secret, but it was my moment of triumph. It felt good. As I said, one can be flexible about hours. One can make plans for other activities around whatever hours the business takes up.
Okay.
And I don't have a boss, or, I might say I'm my own boss. When I was teaching full-time, I had a couple of chairpersons, but my relationship with the last one, unfortunately he died of prostate cancer, was very, very cordial, very supportive. So there was something about him, interestingly enough, that if people didn't really know him that well, he could create fear in them. He sort of radiated a kind of coldness, but when one got to know him better, it wasn't that way. The only real sort of specific answer I can give to that, I subscribe, and I have subscribed for years, to Poets and Writers magazine, which has not only articles by other writers, but it has a section called Calls for Material. Now, I used to find it much more profitable than I do now, because lately a lot of these publications that are calling for material want it computerized, and I don't feel like getting computer literate just for them. But I still, I guess, get some benefit out of the magazine. Yeah.
Business.
Not at all, because of my negative attitude toward most of this. I think that technology is absolutely dehumanizing. And I suppose that is one of the main sources of my negative feelings about it. I think if I were walking along the street and passed out, lost consciousness, the minute I opened my eyes or showed any sort of life or response, the person who had found me would want to know what's, what's not just what's your zip code, but what's your website? Your website, and if I then, by the good graces of this person, got brought to the nearest hospital, which probably would be Coney Island Hospital, though I'm not sure, someone would want to know what is your social security number, and do you have a computer, in which case, what is your website? Not enough of them. I don't have a business-oriented head. All as it is, I guess I would have to attribute it to some of my own efforts. And, well, it seems to me that some other people's success is the result of their having sort of useful connections. I don't feel that I have enough of them. I think to a great extent hard work, but also a reasonable amount of success. Success being a positive experience. Now, not that I normally even talk about this or show it to anybody. These walls are decorated with, evidence of some of my successes. Even the 2 cash prizes that I won not that long ago for fiction contests for short stories, which, as it turned out, were about 20 years old, but had never been published. And so they were. This is in a literary, as it's called, special interest group of American Mensa, to which I belong. And I now have a sort of comfortable relationship with the fiction editor of their magazine. In fact, well, she lives out in, I don't know where, but notice I have, you haven't commented on my owl collection, and I'm surprised. Most people, when they walk in, but I think she's seen real owls, and so she now refers to me as her sister in owls. So that's nice. And I won what I can tell you jokingly is big bucks from these 2 stories. $25 for one and $50 for the other. What is, I would like to believe, but I don't know that this is a fact, that I have a unique writing style, and that some of the things that I focus on, not all of them, but some of them are unique to me. That I can be interviewed in a social or sociable and painless way. This one is called Feminine Prerogatives, and it has in it 3 pieces about women's empowerment, but they're written in 3 different ways, so I will get to that in a moment. I did this as a sort of birthday present for myself. I'm not going to tell you the age, but you could probably figure that out, but that's why I did this. And the subtitle is 3 Tales of Empowerment. Women's empowerment. This was the most
Okay.
recent book, but you know, I can tell you about the others.
Sure.
This one was the first one I ever did. It was done at Wingate High School, which has a big graphic arts department. And it's called Hyacinths and Biscuits because in a rather well-known poem called, 10 Definitions of Poetry, the famous poet Carl Sandburg, you've heard of him? No. Said, poetry is the synthesis of hyacinths and biscuits, which is really just a fancy or poetic way of saying poetry puts together many things that we don't usually put together. So that's where I got the title. Oh, and when I did it, long time ago, 1984, I had a book party, and I managed to sell some of them as a result. I had to get chairs brought in, and of course food, and it was fun. Okay, and a friend of mine, who unfortunately is not living anymore, did the artwork, because I can't draw. That's another thing I can't do. Mentioned some others. Then I did what Leo refers to as my owl book. If you're wondering, let me get this over with. Why the Owl Collection? When my son Aaron, who is now going to be 50 years old, believe it, was a baby, when he got me up at ungodly hours, the babies get one up, he had a round face, and he had great big eyes, and so I named him Owl. And that is what, I didn't name him, I nicknamed him Owl. To show you that he was relatively well adjusted through all of this, when he was 5 years old, he proclaimed to me, I am not an owl, I am a human being. But I'm not convinced, so. He has a very establishment job now. He's a journalist. He's an editor for the Wall Street Journal. After I retired and I had more time, about 3 of these owl poems a day would come to me. And so we finally decided I should do a collection of them. And I got another artist to do the artwork. And these are all owl poems.
Show the picture of the Great Horned Owl's Proclamation.
Oh, and the Great Horned Owl's proclamation is, I don't do mornings, because owls, of course, are night birds.
Right.
But I was thinking of the better-known saying, I don't do windows, I'm sure. So this owl's is, here's the picture.
Perfect.
So that's the reason for the big owl collection. It keeps growing. Let's see. You want me to read an owl poem?
Yeah.
A short one? Okay. No, not the proclamation. There's one in here called Remediation. And of course, remediation is something that almost any English professor, particularly at a community college, has to deal with. So let me read you this. It's only 16 lines long. Though hard to believe or a bit convoluted, an owlet once needed help when he hooted. For frustrating days, don't dare mumble a dumb thing. When he did, we'd all ask, did he really say something? After resisting, this deficient hooter hired a gray owl to be his tutor. They practiced until, instead of cruel laughter, he heard praise, hooted happily, long ever after. And this is
Perfect. Like that.
okay. Let's see. That's 1, 2, 3. We have two more. Light Breaks is an abbreviated version of a collection of poems that I had to submit when I got my MFA in poetry from Brooklyn College now. And I had to submit 2 copies, and then I decided I'd like it published. So I found a publishing company, Big Easy Press, that's now out of business, and I did. Now, Light Breaks comes from one of my favorite poems. Did you ever hear of the Welsh poet Dylan Thomas? No. Okay. Well, anyway, he wrote a poem. I'm not going to read it to you now, but the first 2 words are light breaks where no sun shines. And I took that and some of the other lines in the poem and I used them as titles of the various parts of this book. And that's how I put it together. And finally, the last book that I did back in 1987 is called Wisdom Revisited, Athena Speaks, and Other Owl Songs, because the owl was her bird. She was the goddess of wisdom. But
Yeah.
people who know about birds say that owls really aren't that smart at all. I mean, that this whole expression, the wise old owl, isn't even accurate. But a lot of people think they are. And so the speaker in most of these poems is Athena, the goddess of wisdom. And her bird is the owl. So those are my, separate publications, plus a whole collection of poems and stories and things in other people's journals and magazines and whatever.